Welcome to the Fall Asleep series on Sober Without God. This series is designed to help you fall asleep while listening to stories about the scientists and non-believers who have made an impact on our world. If you're like me and have trouble going to sleep or staying asleep, videos like this may help you relax while also learning. It is my hope that hearing these stories in a calm and peaceful way will help guide you to the relaxation and sleep you're looking for. Before we begin, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. It's a big help to the channel and will encourage me to make more videos like this. My goal is to be able to make these videos ad-free as the channel continues to grow. These videos are here to pay homage to some of the greatest thinkers of our time while helping you relax and meditate or fall to sleep. So now, let's settle into a comfortable position and get ready for some peaceful rest. Inhale, hold for 3. Exhale slowly. This is your time to rest, to listen, to let go of the day. Tonight, we journey through the life, work, and ideas of Richard Dawkins, a boy born in colonial Africa who would grow to become one of the most influential voices in evolutionary biology and modern humanism. Imagine the African plains, vast and alive with the sounds of nature. That's where our story begins. Inhale, hold, and exhale. Clinton Richard Dawkins was born on March 26, 1941, in Nairobi, Kenya, then a British colony. His parents, Jean Mary Vivian Ladner and Clinton John Dawkins, were of British descent. Richard's father was serving in the King's African Rifles during World War II when Richard was born. After the war ended, the family returned to England, setting on an old estate in Oxfordshire. Young Richard grew up in a world of curiosity and observation. He often explored the countryside, watching the interplay of animals, plants, and ecosystems. He later described his childhood as one filled with wonder, not in a supernatural sense, but in a simple marvel of nature's complexity. These early experiences shaped the way Richard saw the world as a place full of questions to be asked and patterns to be uncovered. By the time Richard was a teenager, his curiosity turned toward bigger questions. Why do we exist? What is life for? But unlike many who turned to religion for answers, Richard found himself increasingly skeptical of faith-based explanations. The seeds of his future atheism and his passion for rational inquiry were already being planted. Now inhale, hold, and exhale. These early years were the foundation. They built the framework of a man who would later dedicate his life to explaining life itself. By his late teens, Richard Dawkins was fully immersed in questions of biology and philosophy. He wanted to understand life, not through myth or metaphor, but through evidence, logic, and exploration. In 1959, Richard enrolled in college at Oxford. He came under the mentorship of Nico Tinbergen, a pioneering Dutch ethologist who would later win the Nobel Prize for his work in animal behavior. Tinbergen's influence on Richard was profound. He introduced him to the rigorous methods of observing and interpreting animal behavior, laying the groundwork for Richard's later contributions to evolutionary theory. It wasn't just science that Dawkins learned at Oxford. It was a way of thinking. In 1962, Richard graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in zoology. But his time at Oxford wasn't over. He stayed on, conducting postgraduate research under Tinbergen's guidance, focusing on animal decision-making and behavior. These years deepened his conviction that life could be understood and beautifully explained without recourse to the supernatural. In 1966, Richard completed his Doctor of Philosophy in Zoology. His research explored the communication and behavior of animals, helping him see how complex behaviors can emerge from simple evolutionary rules. Oxford didn't just shape Richard's intellect. It solidified his mission to make the mechanics of evolution clear, compelling, and accessible to anyone. Now inhale, hold, and exhale. By the end of the 1960s, Richard was no longer just a student of biology. He was becoming a voice for it. By the late 1960s, Richard Dawkins began his academic career as an assistant professor of zoology at the University of California, Berkeley. It was a time of intellectual and cultural upheaval. The late 1960s were alive with protest, discovery, and new ways of thinking. Richard found himself inspired by the American spirit of openness and debate. But it was back at Oxford where his most important work would take shape. In the early 1970s, Richard returned to Oxford as a lecturer in zoology. It was here that he began synthesizing his ideas on evolutionary biology. Ideas that would soon revolutionize the way we understand life. In 1976, Richard published his first book, The Selfish Gene. The title was provocative. The idea, even more so. In this groundbreaking work, Dawkins reframed evolution. It wasn't organisms or even species that were the units of evolution. It was genes. Genes, he argued, act as self-interested replicators. They build bodies, human bodies, animal bodies, not for the good of the individual or the group, but to ensure their own survival and replication. This wasn't cynicism. It was clarity. Dawkins wrote, "We are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes." The The book also introduced the world to a concept that would take on a life of its own. The meme. A meme, as Dawkins coined it, was an idea, behavior, or style that spreads from person to person, evolving in culture the way genes evolve in biology. In one stroke, Dawkins connected biology and culture, evolution in the body, and evolution in the mind. The reaction was explosive. The selfish gene made Richard Dawkins a household name in science. Some praised him for bringing clarity and elegance to evolutionary theory. Others criticized him for what they saw as a bleak, reductionist view of life. But one thing was certain: Richard Dawkins had changed the conversation. Now inhale, hold, and exhale. The selfish gene wasn't just a book. It was a manifesto for a new way of seeing ourselves, not as the pinnacle of evolution, but as vehicles for something older and more enduring: the genes that built us. After the seismic impact of the selfish gene, Richard Dawkins continued to refine and expand his evolutionary thinking. In 1982, he published The Extended Phenotype. While the selfish gene had introduced the world to the concept of genes as the central players in evolution, this new book went further. It explored how the influence of genes extends far beyond the bodies they inhabit. Imagine a beaver building a dam. The dam isn't part of the beaver's body, but it is, in a very real sense, part of its phenotype, an extension of the genetic instructions that drive the beaver's behavior. Dawkins argued that the reach of genes stretches into the environment, shaping not just the organism, but the world around it. This was more than a technical insight. It was a paradigm shift. It asked us to see evolution not just as a process occurring within the borders of flesh and bone, but as something that radiates outward into nests, into tools, into cultures. The extended phenotype wasn't written for mass audiences. It was dense, technical, and aimed at specialists. But for those who wrestled with its ideas, it became a cornerstone of modern evolutionary theory. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Dawkins continued to teach at Oxford and became a fellow of New College. His reputation grew not just as a researcher, but as a communicator. He had a gift for taking complex ideas and making them vivid. It was during these years that Dawkins also began to emerge as one of the loudest voices for science in the public square. He wrote articles, gave lectures, appeared on television. His aim was simple: to bring science out of the laboratory and into the living room. Now inhale and hold and exhale. This wasn't just the evolution of Richard Dawkins as a thinker. It was the evolution of Richard Dawkins as a public intellectual. By the early 2000s, Richard Dawkins was already well known in scientific circles. But soon, he would become a household name and a controversial one. In 2006, Dawkins published The God Delusion. The book was bold. It was unapologetic, and it ignited a cultural firestorm. In The God Delusion, Dawkins argued that belief in God, in any God, is not only unsupported by evidence, but actively harmful to the progress of humanity. He challenged religion as an outdated system of thought, a relic of our evolutionary past, and urged humanity to embrace reason, science, and secular ethics. He wrote, "We are all atheists about most of the gods humanity has ever believed in. Some of us just go one God further." For Dawkins, atheism wasn't simply a rejection of belief. It was an invitation to see the universe as it truly is, without supernatural overlays, and to find meaning in reality itself. The book sold millions of copies. It topped bestseller lists. It was translated into over 30 languages. And it sparked intense debate. Supporters hailed Dawkins as a courageous voice for secularism. Critics accused him of militancy and hostility toward faith. Undeniable. The God delusion became a defining text of the so-called New Atheism movement. Dawkins was no longer just an evolutionary biologist. He was a cultural figurehead. Now inhale, hold, exhale. Through it all, Dawkins insisted that his aim wasn't to mock believers, but instead to liberate minds, to show that all morality and purpose don't require divine authorship, that the cosmos, understood through science, is more wondrous than any myth. By the late 2000s, Richard Dawkins was no longer just a scientist or an author. He was a public intellectual and one of the most recognizable faces of modern atheism. He debated. He debated priests, theologians, and philosophers on stages across the world. He sparred with figures like John Lennox, an Oxford mathematician and Christian apologist, and engaged in dialogues with thinkers such as Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Daniel Dennett, often collectively referred to as the four horsemen of new atheism. Dawkins approached these debates with precision and patience. He rarely raised his voice. Instead, he wielded evidence and reason, encouraging audiences to question long held assumptions. His critics saw him as combative, but to his supporters, Dawkins was offering something more profound: permission to doubt. For many who had quietly struggled with their faith, his words were liberating. Beyond debates, Dawkins became a fixture at secular conferences, delivering lectures that blended evolutionary science with humanist ethics. He also appeared on major television programs, from BBC documentaries to interviews with global news outlets, continuing his mission to make science accessible and compelling to the public. Now inhale, hold, and exhale. In these arenas, Dawkins wasn't just advocating for atheism. He was advocating for intellectual honesty. He was advocating for living fully awake in a universe that demands our curiosity. While the God delusion cemented Richard Dawkins as a leading voice of atheism, his later works showed a different side of him. that of a teacher eager to share the wonder of science. In 2011, he published The Magic of Reality. This was not a polemic against religion. It was a celebration of the natural world. Written for younger audiences and the curious at heart, it explained scientific concepts through storytelling. Myths from around the world introduced each chapter before Dawkins peeled them back to reveal the science behind the phenomena. From rainbows to earthquakes, from the origins of life to the evolution of species. The book painted reality not as cold or dull, but as magical in its own right. Dawkins wrote, "The truth is more magical than any myth." In 2019, he released Outgrowing God, a book aimed especially at young adults navigating questions of belief. Part memoir, part guide, it gently invited readers to examine the roots of their faith and to see how science offers answers as profound and more reliable than religious tradition. Now inhale, hold, and exhale. These works revealed something important. Beneath the sharp edges of his public persona, Dawkins is driven by a deep love of knowledge and a desire to share it with the next generation. By the 2010s, Richard Dawkins had become more than a scientist, more than an author, more than a debater. He had become an institution. In 2006, the same year he published The God Delusion, Dawkins founded the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. Its mission was simple yet ambitious: to promote secularism, to support scientific education, and to protect the rights of non-believers worldwide. Through his foundation, Dawkins helped fund educational programs, supported campaigns against pseudoscience and religious extremism, and created resources for those leaving faith communities. He wanted to build a world where curiosity thrived and evidence-based thinking shaped public life. Dawkins also became a key figure in the global humanist movement. He gave talks at international conferences, collaborated with organizations like the British Humanist Association, and inspired countless individuals to embrace humanism, an ethical framework grounded not in divine authority, but in compassion, reason, and shared humanity. For Dawkins, this wasn't just activism. It was personal. He saw humanism as a natural extension of his scientific worldview. If we are products of evolution, then our greatest calling is to use our brief lives to make life better for others. Now inhale, hold, and exhale. Now let us listen to some quotes by Richard Dawkins. We are going to die, and that makes us the lucky ones. Most people are never going to die because they are never going to be born. The potential people who could have been here in my place, but who will in fact never see the light of day, outnumber the sand grains of Arabia. Certainly, those unborn ghosts include greater poets than Keats, scientists greater than Newton. We know this because the set of possible people allowed by our DNA so massively exceeds the set of actual people. In the teeth of these stupefying odds, it is you and I, in our ordinariness, that we are here. We privileged few who won the lottery of birth against all odds. How dare we whine at our inevitable return to that prior state from which the vast majority have never stirred. I am against religion because it teaches us to be satisfied with not understanding the world. There is something infantile in the presumption that somebody else has a responsibility to give your life meaning and point. The truly adult view, by contrast, is that our life is as meaningful, as full, and as wonderful as we choose to make it. Do not indoctrinate your children. Teach them how to think for themselves, how to evaluate evidence, and how to disagree with you. More generally, one of the truly bad effects of religion is that it teaches us that it is a virtue to be satisfied with not understanding. A child is not a Christian child, not a Muslim child, but a child of Christian parents or a child of Muslim parents. This latter nomenclature, by the way, would be an excellent piece of consciousness raising for the children themselves. A child who is told she is a child of Muslim parents will immediately realize that religion is something for her to choose or reject when she becomes old enough to do so. The total amount of suffering per year in the natural world is beyond all decent contemplation. During the minute that it takes me to compose this sentence, thousands of animals are being eaten alive. Many others are running for their lives, whimpering with fear. Others are slowly being devoured from within by rasping parasites. Thousands of all kinds are dying of starvation, thirst, and disease. It must be so. If there ever is a time of plenty, this very fact will automatically lead to an increase in the population until the natural state of starvation and misery is restored. In a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces, and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky. And you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. Do you really mean to tell me the only reason you try to be good is to gain God's approval and reward, or to avoid his disapproval and punishment? That's not morality. That's just sucking up, apple polishing, looking over your shoulder at the great surveillance camera in the sky, or the still small wiretap inside your head, monitoring your every move, even your every base thought. Be thankful that you have a life, and forsake your vain and presumptuous desire for a second one. To be fair, much of the Bible is not systematically evil, but just plain weird, as you would expect of a chaotically cobbled together anthology of disjointed documents, composed, revised, translated, distorted, and improved by hundreds of anonymous authors, editors, and copyists unknown to us and mostly unknown to each other, spanning 9 centuries. Faith can be very, very dangerous, and deliberately to implant it into the vulnerable mind of an innocent child is a grievous wrong. After sleeping through 100 million centuries, we have finally opened our eyes on a sumptuous planet, sparkling with color, bountiful with life. Within decades, we must close our eyes again. Isn't it a noble and enlightened way of spending our brief time in the sun? This is how I answer when I am asked, as I am surprisingly often, why I bother to get up in the mornings. When two opposite points of view are expressed with equal intensity, the truth does not necessarily lie exactly halfway between them. It is possible for one side to be simply wrong. Religion is about turning untested belief into unshakable truth through the power of institutions and the passage of time. Faith is the great cop out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. Faith is the belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence. Let us try to teach generosity and altruism because we are born selfish. Let us understand what our selfish genes are up to, because we may then at least have the chance to upset their designs, something that no other species has ever aspired to do. There's real poetry in the real world. Science is the poetry of reality. It's been suggested that if the supernaturalists really had the powers they claim, they'd win the lottery every week. I prefer to point out that they could also win a Nobel Prize for discovering fundamental physical forces hitherto unknown to science. Either way, why are they wasting their talents doing party turns on television? By all means, let's be open minded, but not so open minded that our brains drop out. I am thrilled to be alive at time when humanity is pushing against the limits of understanding. Even better, we may eventually discover that there are no limits. The majority of children born into the world tend to inherit the beliefs of their parents. And that, to me, is one of the most regrettable facts of them all. You could give Aristotle a tutorial, and you could thrill him to the core of his being. Aristotle was an encyclopedic polymath, an all-time intellect. Yet not only can you know more than him about the world, you also can have a deeper understanding of how everything works. Such is the privilege of living after Newton, Darwin, Einstein, Planck, Watson, Crick, and their colleagues. I'm not saying you're more intelligent than Aristotle or wiser. For all I know, Aristotle's the cleverest person who ever lived. That's not the point. The point is only that science is cumulative and we live later. Many of us saw religion as harmless nonsense. Beliefs might lack all supporting evidence, but we thought if people needed a crutch for consolation, where's the harm? September 11th changed that. The feeling of awed wonder that science can give us is one of the highest experiences of which the human psyche is capable. It is a deep aesthetic passion to rank with the finest that music and poetry can deliver. It is truly one of the things that make life worth living, and it does so, if anything, more effectively if it convinces us that the time we have for living is quite finite. Now we arrive at the quiet. Richard Dawkins' legacy is not only in his books or debates, it is in the way he taught us to ask better questions. That meaning doesn't require myth. That wonder doesn't require the supernatural. That the natural world, in all its complexity, is more beautiful than anything we could invent. Inhale, hold, exhale. Picture yourself walking through a quiet English meadow, the grass cool against your feet, the air gentle on your skin. Above you, the night sky stretches endlessly, a cathedral of stars. Dawkins often said that understanding evolution doesn't make life less special. It makes it more miraculous. Not because it was designed, not because it arose from simple rules over billions of years, into something as complex as you. Breathe in, feel the air full of history, oxygen forged in stars long gone. Hold and release, letting go of everything but this moment. You are part of the great story of life, a thread in the tapestry of evolution, a witness to the grandeur of the cosmos. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on a stream. There is nowhere to go, nothing to do, just the gentle rhythm of your breath and the quiet hum of existence. Inhale, hold, exhale. The questions will still be here tomorrow, but tonight you can rest. Good night, and may your dreams be full of wonder.